AITA for telling my mom I'll never let her husband adopt me and she needs to get over it? My parents broke up when my mom was pregnant with me. My dad was in the military when I was little and when I was 5 he came home all fucked up from what he had seen and he was never the same again. He ended up doing drugs because medications and therapy weren't helping him and he was doing really badly. I'd see him cry a lot and hold his head and I know he had flashbacks and relived stuff while I was there. But I never felt unsafe. Just really sad that my dad was hurting. My mom ended up suing for full custody and got more custody of me but I still got to see my dad every other weekend. Mom hated it and tried to fight that, but the court-appointed therapist I should still have every other weekend with dad. Mom got married to Dan when I was 9. After they got married the two of them sat me down and asked me how I'd like Dan to be my dad legally, and we could be a family, all 3 of us. I told them I already had a dad and I didn't want another one. We went back to court and I found out while speaking to the judge that it was because Mom had tried to sever Dad's parental rights and put in a petition for Dan to adopt me. The judge asked me how I felt about it and I got so scared that he would do it and I begged him not to and I said I didn't want Dan to be my dad and I didn't want to lose my dad. The judge listened and denied the adoption request. Mom and Dan still fight against me seeing Dad. Mom has taken my phone from me a few times because Dad and I would text during the week. When I was 12 Mom told me Dad had picked drugs over me and I have Dan now who would never do that to me. She told me he would be a much better father. I told her Dan wasn't my dad and no matter how much she hates Dad or thinks he's terrible, I disagree and I love him and Dan will never be able to compete with that. Dan has asked me himself a few times to let him adopt me. He told me he loves me and wants so badly to be able to look after me. He told me if anything happened to Mom he would hate to see me live with Dad and be taking care of him. I told him I would rather be with my dad than stay with him, someone who isn't my dad. He got mad a couple of times and a couple of other times he told me I was showing how young I was. I'm 15 now BTW. So my mom decided to approach Dad and ask him to willingly give up his rights so Dan can adopt me and she would let him call me once a week and see me once every 2 months. Dad said no and Mom cursed him out. I waited until she was done and I told her I'll never let her husband adopt me and she needs to get over it. She told me she cannot understand me dismissing a good man who loves me and would do anything for me for a man who can't get off drugs for me. I told her Dan doesn't have to live with the demons my dad does. She told me I'll regret my decision in the future and I'm being stubborn for no reason. AITA?